Welcome back. In the last video, we took a look at the test suite, specifically the compilable, failed compilation, and runnable tests. In this video, we'll continue exploring the test suite, but first, something I forgot to mention in the last video. When you want to easily change the expected output of tests, you can use the auto update environment variable. So for example, in this test, when I add some new lines, the line number won't be correct anymore. But instead of manually updating it, what I can do is run the test with auto update. And it shows that the output has been updated, and it has. I did mention this in the second video where we did a simple bug fix, but I wanted to mention it again in this video in case you missed it, because it's very useful. Now, some of the other tests are the unit tests. These can be found in the unit folder. And instead of invoking DMD on a file and checking the output, it tests by calling compiler functions directly and comparing against internal data structures. For example, here the lecture is tested by giving an input string and testing against specific members of the token enum, which allows for more specific tests. To run only the unit tests, you can use the -u flag. And when it doesn't give any error messages, it succeeds. And there you have it. If I were to change this and run again, now it will fail. It shows here this line. This assertion trips now that the array contains the wrong values. Other than these unit tests, there are also the literal unit test blocks scattered throughout the DMD source code. For example, in the source DMD root folder, many utilities can be found, for example hash.d, which has a function that calculates a hash for arbitrary data. And scrolling down a bit, you'll see a plain old unit test. To run these, go outside the test folder and enter the source folder, from which we also built the compiler. Now invoke build.d again, but with the unit test argument. And this will run all those unit tests. You can see if I make a change here, then it will fail and point to the tripping assert. Another test you can run from the source folder is the C++ header test. So what are these testing? To show this, first I need to make a little change to one of the data structures, which is extern C++. So I can add a little field here and run the test again. And now it will fail and explain that the file source/dmd/frontend.h is out of sync. It says that we can update the header file and fix the error by running the same command with auto update. And now it says that the reference header file has been updated. And if we take a look at the diff, you can see that it added a new field to frontend.h, but frontend.h is not used by LDC and GDC, the decompilers that access the D frontend from C++, and therefore need header files to interface with it. No, this frontend.h file is currently only generated to inform you that the manually maintained header files need to be updated, which is also what the message said. Make sure those changes have been properly reflected in the relevant header files. So in this case, I need to update aggregate.h. I need to add the field as well. And now I properly updated the headers. Note that the generated frontend.h depends on the operating system where you run the update command, and the version of frontend.h that's checked in the GitHub repository has been generated on Linux. So unfortunately, this is a bit more complicated on Windows and Mac. Finally, we're going to run the unit tests of DRuntime and Phobos. I'm going to go back to the root of the repository and enter the DRuntime folder. and run the make command, but now with unittest. And it's going. And after a while, it's done. I can do the same with Phobos and run the exact same command. And now it's going to run the Phobos unit tests module by module. This took about 3 minutes, but it's done now and it succeeded. But since this one takes so long, it's often useful to only run the unit tests that you need. And to do that, I'm going to modify the command to not just unit test, but to run std/bigint.test. So bigint.test is a fake file, and with some makefile trickery, it only runs the unit tests of that module. And indeed, one module passed unit tests. So that concludes my exploration of the test suite for now. I haven't covered all tests, but these are the ones that I use the most or have to update the most. But for more information, you can find the README in the compiler/test folder. And it might be easier to read in the browser, so I'm going to switch to that real quickly. Here on GitHub, go to compiler, test, and here you can find more information on the types of tests, test configuration, environment variables, stuff like that. Here it talks about unit tests. And if you want to know more about the uncommon tests that we didn't cover, like the D-shell tests, you can follow this link and read more about it here. If you can't or don't want to run the tests locally, you can also open a pull request. For example, this one. And then see the output of the continuous integration, which also runs these tests. But more on that in the next video. See you then.